Over the past 48 hours, we've seen some movement in telecom of disengagement with Chinese tendering. We have now seen movement on the railways on disengagement with Chinese companies. We have seen a boycott China movement that is going on in this country. But what does that boil down to? Do we even know the extent of the Chinese investments into this country, the number of the Chinese products that are being sold? We have to act, and there's a fundamental reason for this. You make the Chinese goods not in demand in India, then you don't have to worry about fighting battles on dumping duties in the WTO and counter Chinese measures. We simply say, you can try to sell here, the Indians don't want your products, and for the products that are currently existing, we as the people of this country need to know what are the Indian available alternatives. Think, when you are given the choice in a supermarket that this is organic produce, your choice to buy it, that same choice needs to be given to you on e-commerce platforms, on supermarket platforms, on platforms in white goods firms and retail shops, that this is a product that is Chinese sourced and this is a product that's made in India. You make the choice which one you want to buy, and empowerment of us is the best thing. Let's open this up and reduce this to some practicalities. Number one, and let's get our touchpad on our screens. We should create a list that has ownership of Chinese firms listed in India. Publish this list of all Chinese holding in all firms that are trading in India, including those are Benami fronts that the Chinese use to buy out stakes of Indian companies or sell products in India. Publish the list. Then we should ask all firms operating in India to declare what are the loans and equity that they've taken from Chinese agencies and companies. Let's make it mandatory for made in China to be boldly written on all products that are sourced from China. Let us give the Indian user an option, a choice, that this clearly says made in China. Point 4, we must have an Indian alternative list for every Chinese product and app. This is the alternative that you may not know is being manufactured by an Indian company, because the Chinese have swarmed the market, they have better publicity, they have better ad marketing budgets. This Indian alternative list needs to be created. Let's push all e-commerce sites to mark all the made in China products boldly so people buying online know what they are buying. Let's push all the e-commerce sites to offer the Indian alternative option to any user that happens to be browsing a product that is made in China. Like you have the ingredient list in a food article, let's make it mandatory for these firms to publish Chinese parts on their product packaging. 80%, 20%, 30% of our parts are sourced from manufacturers in China. Create a Swadeshi standard for a certified 100% made in India product to distinguish Indian products, or a certified standard for no Chinese sourcing product. You can source from Australia, you can source from the US, you can source from Israel, but this product has no Chinese parts. Make that a certified standard. You have the ISO standards, make it part of that. Immediately make all Chinese owned firms ineligible for government contracts within India. Let's stop the post facto that once they do the tendering and then we wake up one day and realize it's a Chinese firm. We've seen that happen in these contracts that have already been issued. Now we've done this with PPE. So let's now create a list of products that currently don't have a made in India alternative and invite our companies to make them. You've done this with PPE. Let's do this across the board. And finally, let us be starting an I Back a Made in India investment fund for Indians to contribute directly in equity in Indian startups. We're already seeing the government talking about equity in Indian startups. Why shouldn't we have a broad fund where we can become stakeholders in the Make in India story? We need to have a Swadeshi e-commerce app that only has Indian products, or at least does not have products from China. Let us give the people the option that this app, like a 99-cent store, everything is made in India. So you can buy whatever and you can be assured that it's made in India. And finally, let's create an online platform. There exists abroad a platform called Patreon, where micro businesses, even individuals, can get direct public support, financial support directly from citizens. Let's give the Indian citizens an option, and let us set a clear target to either half or cut by 20% or 25% the trade deficit with China. Talking about it when you're running a 60 billion trade deficit and saving a few $1,000s here and there makes no difference. You have to have a clear target, and let's invite Indians to be part of the target. And you can't do any of this if you don't have silicon chip manufacturing here in India. This plant needs to be set up, the foundation stone needs to be set up in 100 days. So let's have a 100-day plan for actualizing this. Harish Bijur joining us on the broadcast. Harish Bijur, how do we now actualize the sentiment of people who say boycott China?
Okay, firstly, the clear point is that what happened in the Galwan Valley, with that, China has shot itself in the wallet. China has not shot itself in the foot, but in the wallet. And this is 2020 and not 1962. And in 2020, the wallet seems to be more important than the foot. So China has shot itself in the wallet. Now, this simply means to say that there is an economic war. At this point of time, it's an economic skirmish. It can become an economic battle and eventually an economic war. And everything that we are hearing in terms of the Boycott China Charter is leading to that, which simply means to say that the fight is not only at the LAC, but it's at the LEC as well, which is the line of economic control. I think there is a demand for transparency, and one of the key issues in this entire thing seems to be the color of money. Because you and I need to remember that China is no longer only a geography. In the early days, China was a manufacturing geography. It had become a behemoth for the world at large in terms of manufacturing. Not anymore. China is not a geography. China is a subject called economics today, which means to say that China is not concerned only about manufacturing within its geography, but China is taking its money and putting it out in every geography. And India has seen an investment. If you look at the last 5-year investment terms, you would see as much as $8 billion US having entered the country. Possibly about $5.5 billion are in the startup economy, and the rest, the remaining, is actually in the rest of the economy. Now, this is going to be questioned by people. How? I think it all depends on the action plan of substitution, of import substitution, because the end goal is to ensure possibly that the deficit is corrected as far as India and China
Mr. Bijur, I'm just trying to approach this from a consumer perspective. What would I like to know as a consumer? I would like to know that this product, whether it is made in China or not. I would like to know if an Indian alternative is available to me. I can do the price comparisons myself. From a consumer perspective, what is the information that we should be provided so at least we can make an educated choice?
You know, the key issue is this, that when a consumer goes into the market to buy a product, he does not go to buy a made in China product. We need to appreciate that.
Correct.
He goes into the market to buy a high quality product, an affordable product, and a product which gives him longevity. Now, at this point of time, he may not even know that what he's buying is a Chinese product, because he or she may get confused and say that this could be a Korean product, it could be a German product, because consumers are not as savvy as you and I think consumers are. So today, I think, the labeling that seems to be coming out as a part of the Boycott China Charter seems to be saying that there is a statutory warning which says made in China. Now, this seems to be the war, the economic war at hand.
Okay,
and I think consumers who look at it will make their own decisions.
Yes, so if it's put in my face that this is made in China, from your cheap LED light strips which we put up to the most expensive products, at least then we have the option. Let me quickly get Professor Nalapat into this. Professor Nalapat, actualizing this, now we talk at the government level, but we know that there are complications, anti-dumping, China takes you to WTO, we can keep doing this. The government must begin at least with its own contracts. And it's up to us to know what we can do.
Well, Rishabh, I think yours is a very, very important program. The fact is that even by WTO rules, national security trumps every other consideration. And if there is a security issue involved, then very definitely the country is fully justified in blocking a product. I don't know, I mean, I'd like to repeat what I said a few days earlier. I'm in India. The back end is done by Huawei or ZTE.
Correct.
Do you know how that happened? A particular finance minister in India blocked funding to all Indian alternatives. There's a place called CDAC, Center for Development of Advanced Computing. Funding was slowed down to that. Funding for wireless research was blocked. A particular finance minister systematically blocked funding because he's very friendly with a particular tycoon in Hong Kong. And I don't want to name that tycoon. It's a very important tycoon based in Hong Kong. And he's very friendly with that tycoon. His family is very friendly with that tycoon. So this is what happened. So my point is, we have a history of not making in India. And worst, and ensuring that those who can make in India, especially in high tech, are driven out by the misuse of agencies and the government system. So we have to make in India. We have to remove, very frankly, the influence of back-end systems that we cannot trust in security. And let's make a start with our mobile telephone network.
Okay, I think a very small start has been made with the decisions that have been made in the past 24 hours, but by no means does that mean that suddenly Huawei and ZTE are going to disappear from the telecom space. It might take several years, if not decades, to disengage because of the extent of the hardware infiltration. Software app you can still change quickly. Hardware, very difficult to change at enormous cost. Let's get in Sanjay Agarwal. Sanjay Agarwal, I'm trying to look at it from not from the government perspective, from the consumer perspective. You can just unmute your mic for us, sir. If you're going to buy a product, let's say you're buying a laptop, you're looking at a brand and you're looking at specs and you're looking at price. Now within that laptop, maybe a chip, maybe all the chips, maybe the screen is made in China. You don't know. So how do I, as a consumer who doesn't want to buy conscious, buy Chinese, know the difference?
You see, I think you have suggested a slew of measures. There is 15 of them, and I think most of them address how to make sure that one doesn't end up buying a Chinese product. So, in fact, I would be repeating your views if I, try to answer this particular question. But let me just confirm one particular move that you have recommended, which is to lay the foundation of first silicon chip manufacturing plant within 100 days.
Here.
I strongly endorse it. Our PhD chamber has been, I think, recommending this for the last 1 year. In each and every recommendation that we send to the government, we have been talking about it. And let me tell you, this chip manufacturing facility cannot be set up by a private sector. The government has been inviting people for the last 2-3 years, or rather 5 years. And people have come up and they have backed out because of the size of investment. But if you look at the volume of imports that is coming into the country, simply because we lack the chip manufacturing capability, I think that alone would justify it. Our recommendation is that a large public sector undertaking in the electronics field, like Bharat Electronics or ITI even or somebody, could be asked to buy the technology and set up a chip manufacturing plant and thereby create a complete ecosystem on which you create the electronic items, integrated circuits, all the parts that go into making of manufacturing of electronic products. The single largest group of items that India is importing from China, it's worth $12 billion currently every year, and that is all electronics / telecom or to some extent solar panels.
Correct.
So if we spend $2 to $3 billion into a chip manufacturing facility, and we start with a policy, let us buy technology and not buy products. That is the motto that we are putting
bang on, bang on, absolutely right.
Let us buy technology. If we don't have it, let's buy it. Similarly, on telecom, on 4G, 5G front, 5G is a bit of a way off. It's still a technology in development. 4G at the same time has lost its sheen. The technology would be available at very reasonable prices. Again, something like CDOT or CDAC or some central government PSU should buy the technology again for 4G and license it out to not just one or two, maybe 5, 10, 20, just like the CDOT model of earlier.
And let's set up a 2,000 crore fund to start developing 5G today. Let's not wait 10 years later for again Huawei to come and ask us to upgrade to 5G or 6G on Mount Everest.
Let them do that. You see, point is we need the basic bread and butter first. And let me tell you, we are spending 50,000 crores on encouraging the manufacturing of mobile phones in India. That is called the PLI scheme. Now, against that, if we can spare that sort of funds, we can definitely spare 20,000 crores to set up the chip manufacturing and at the same time, the 4G technology.
Exactly. So we are one of the biggest mobile phone manufacturers in the world, but we are manufacturing for Chinese-owned brands. We are not developing an Indian-owned brand. And that teaches you a very, very valuable lesson. Just stay with me. General Dhruv Katoch, I want you to inject an important perspective on this for our viewers watching. How important it is to win this fight, because unless we see Chinese firms seeing a 20, 30, 40, 50% drop in sales in India, this was meaningless.
You see, the government response, I think, has been very positive now. I mean, they're very focused on how to deal with China. And the response, in my view, has to be on four fronts. One is the economic front, which is an ongoing process now, and which is now picking up steam with public support. The second is political, then third is diplomatic. But after with these three, we should never ever lose sight of the military option. I'm not saying we use the military option, but unless you are prepared to put the military option on the table, the other options are not going to work. Rishabh, there's one more thing I wanted to just put across on the table, is the way China operates strategically to get business. And I want to give you the example of a very simple thing, which are the insulators which are on every electric pole.
Correct.
Now, traditionally, these insulators were made by porcelain, which is made in India. Now, it employs about 80,000 people. Now, through the power grid, what has happened is the Chinese are muscled in and they are using polymers which are many times cheaper than the porcelain. Now the question is, while the polymers are far cheaper, the lifetime cost is far more. But when we are looking at a 5-year or a 10-year term, the polymers win. When we are looking over a 40-year time, the porcelain is 10 times cheaper. So
I believe this deal in UP has come under review, but this is the point. This is exactly the point.
Yes. What I mean to say is, what happens is, if the Chinese come in here, and they have started coming in a big way, you are going to kill India's porcelain industry. Once you kill it, 80,000 people are out of a job, and more importantly, it will be impossible to set it up again. China will complete
Dhruv Katoch, General Katoch, a brutal reality check of how many people in sensitive areas, including in our armed forces currently, who would be owning or using a Chinese-made or Chinese-branded mobile phone. That's a security risk, not just a commercial risk. Let me just address this quickly, because Professor Narapat and I had this conversation a few months ago. This is a report that came out in February of 2020, done by Gateway House, that brands Chinese investments in India. Have a look at this. In Bengaluru alone, the Chinese firms have invested in 11 e-commerce firms. They've invested in at least 2 education startups, several fintech firms, auto ancillary, social media and entertainment, logistics, capital goods, electronics, FMCG, in Chennai, in Mumbai, in Pune, in Hyderabad, in Ahmedabad, in Jaipur, in Kanpur. Look at NCR. Look at the number of e-commerce platforms based out of NCR that have Chinese investments. And this report is publicly available online. Let me give you a brief example. These are companies. Have a look at this. Brand name, Big Basket. Chinese investor, Alibaba. Brand name, Baiju's, Tencent Holdings. The investor in this case, Sequoia Capital, Nasper Ventures, Lightspeed. These are the other investors over there. Delivery, Fosun, Dream11, which is the app you guys use for IPL. Again, it's Steadview Capital, Tencent Holdings, Flipkart, Hike, Make My Trip. All of these have Chinese holdings. Let's look at the other one. Ola, Oyo, Paytm Mall, Paytm.com, Policy Bazaar, Quicker, Revigo, all have Chinese-based investments in them. Snapdeal, Swiggy, Udaan, Zomato, all the apps that you use regularly. So every time you are buying a meal for yourself, there is a data service access that Chinese can potentially access and keep a record of what you eat and when you eat. The Alibaba group in itself has investments in Big Basket, Daily Hunt, Paytm Mall, Paytm.com, Ticket New, Viduli, XpressBees, Rapido, Snapdeal, Zomato, Tencent, in Byju's, Ola, in Dream11, in Flipkart, in Hike, Swiggy, Udaan. Xiaomi has investments in Hangama Digital, Mars Play, Oe, Rickshaw, Rapido, ShareChat, Zest Money, City Mall. These are all investments, so which is why we are saying it's good if we know what is done. Professor Nalapat, if we just knew what is done. Now I believe that we are now pushing for digital currency platforms that are indigenous in India to take on these Chinese funded partners that have been beneficiaries to many schemes, including demonetization, that got them going. How do we publish this more widely so we know what we are using and what we are ordering from?
Well, I think, Rishabh, that you are doing a lot in that, and I think everybody should do a lot in that to basically show people the investment structure of different companies. The fact is that the Chinese are taking as much metadata as possible from India. The Americans are also doing that. Others are doing that. The only people who are not taking away Indian metadata are the Indians themselves. And the Chinese are developing artificial intelligence. They are in competition with the Americans. Now, Mr. Agrawal was talking about 5G. You have Taiwan, you have Vietnam, small countries. They have their own 5G networks already running. We had the Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, if I remember. They developed a 5G technology. They were not given any encouragement. Nothing happened. Nobody helped them. And as a consequence, today, we have to go to all kinds of people for 5G, all kinds of foreign people. There's been a systematic effort to destroy Indian talent. The Indian talent has to run away to Singapore or United States or Canada to survive and manufacture their products. They can't do it in India. And I think it's very important for the CBI, it's very important for the National Security Council to look into this systematic throttling of Indian tech companies and favor of foreign competitors, most of whom are Chinese.
And this is exactly what Professor Nalapat is referring to, why you find that the best of the brains that are running the best companies all over the world happen to be Indians, and we wonder why they're not in India. This is one of the reasons why they're not here, because of the stymieing and the stifling and the frustration of breaking the box, breaking the mold, the disruptors. An Indian system needs to be open to disruption, encouraging it, not be fearing it and absolutely killing it off, and then wondering why is it everybody sitting in San Francisco. Sanjay Agarwal, let's quickly discuss the Indian alternatives. Now, I'm taking the particular example of PPE. 2 months ago or 3 months ago, we didn't manufacture almost zero. Now we are the second largest manufacturer in the world. So we isolated an area which was required emergency intervention, and we changed the footprint of the global trade on that within 2 or 3 months. So all the areas where we currently do not have Indian alternatives because the Chinese have swamped the market, how do we go about encouraging companies to make those alternatives?
Well, I think in case of PPEs, it was a very specific situation where whoever had the capability, even, by a long shot, because there was no direct PPE manufacturing facility here, but garments manufacturers, people who had any sort of machinery which could be used, they came up and they saw that, okay, there is a demand. Ultimately in business, one looks at, is there a demand for my product and can I make some profit? End of the day, that is what it happens, and this is the opportunity which Indian businessman, Indian entrepreneur could find and was able to do it. Now the Indian businessman, Indian entrepreneur, why he is getting beaten in his own country is due to many reasons, many of which we have listed, many of which we have talked. But one very important reason that I would like to say is there is a report in the Economic Times, which I read. I think it's not too old. I think last year's report, which said that roughly $13 billion of losses India incurs because of under-invoicing by Chinese companies. Now, this $13 billion is being talked of as
just explain that to our viewers. So you're basically saying if they send a consignment of 500 mobile phones, they're actually billing 400 and 100 are being sold off into the Indian market quietly.
No, that doesn't happen that way mostly. In most cases, what happens is, and usually whether it's mobile phones or any toy or any string of lights that you are using, they would simply invoice the product at maybe 50% or 40% of the actual price, which goes to the customs. So at the Indian customs, there would be a 10% customs duty and let us say 18% CVD or GST on top of that.
Correct.
Roughly that would make it around 30%.
Okay.
So if the Chinese exporter is billing $50 instead of 100, what has happened is that on $50, the Indian importer is saving straight away 30%. So he saved $15. That is a huge price advantage he derives. And the Chinese are not bothered about WTO since the last 50 years or so. We talk about WTO and we talk about being WTO compliant or this or that.
Yes.
This is the biggest advantage that the Chinese are giving to their traders.
Okay, so you've isolated a very important point. Yeah, I want to touch upon it. Mr. Agarwal, I want to touch upon it. How do I, for a young Indian entrepreneur, remove the temptation of simply going to China, purchasing a product and selling it here, where you just become a middleman, rather than setting up your own manufacturing here in India, which of course is a much more cumbersome process. It's easy to go to a trade show and pick up, 2 freighter loads of product and come here and make a buck. But then you become dependent. How do we get away from this temptation?
You see, nationalist slogans do help to some extent, but let us be very honest, the lure of money is much more important. It is the government which has to take some serious steps, serious actions, whether we limit the imports of items by value or by quantity, so that we say, okay, I am not going to import more than this much into our country. And let me tell you, there are so many precedents of so many items on which India has been forced to put limits that, okay, we will not import more than this much quantity or this much value of a product from a country. So why can't we do that on China? Because what is happening is the trade deficit numbers that we are looking at of around $50 billion is actually much higher, because what is happening is there is under-invoicing.
So that's the official. You're saying it could be 30%, 40%, 50% higher potentially. We don't know. It's a good point. Just stay with me. Just stay with me, Mr. Agarwal. Let's get Harish Bajur back in because I know he has to go. Mr. Bajur, address this question for Indian entrepreneurs. What has become the temptation of you hop across to a trade show, you see a cheap product, you think this can sell well in India, you buy a few container loads and you make a percentage, and then over a period of time this becomes your career, it becomes your business rather than producing here?
Well, Rishabh, this is not going to change, come what may, because this is the path of least resistance for an entrepreneur. And early entrepreneurs start out on the trading route, and we have seen every one of our entrepreneurs do it. Actually, the kind of talk that we're talking about can happen either by government to dictate, to say that this shall not happen in India, or it can happen by consumer volition. And I think the government diktat seems to be more decisive in these arenas than consumer volition. Because in terms of consumer volition, water finds its own level. People look for the best quality, longevity, and great price. And most of the time, that happens to be from an origin and a destination called China. So how do you crack that? By diktat, possibly.
Okay, by diktat may be the first step. Maybe that creates an environment for us to be manufacturing on our own, because otherwise we are in this trap we can't get out of. Because the Chinese, it's called the economies of scale. The more scale that they can manufacture with, the cheaper the product will be, and then the cost imperative will remain with them. Harish Bajur, for joining us, thanks very much. I know you have to go. Let me quickly get in Sumit on the same thought. Sumit, just enter this same conversation. We are currently swamped, right?
Yeah.
I think the majority of the mobile phones owned in India, you can pick the brand you want, okay? but the majority in terms of every 10 mobile phones, the 6, 7, 8 are going to be Chinese, owned, manufactured or partly manufactured in China, including the biggest brands. You have the Oppos, the Vivos, the Xiaomis, the OnePlus. You have even Apple is manufactured in China. The only big mobile phone company is Samsung, which is Korean manufactured. Indian mobile phone company, the brand we came up which was again sourced out of China. It was not made here.
Correct.
Something has to give.
Assembled here. I think, Rishabh, there are a couple of points here. The point number one is that, when you look at this, you have to divide it into parts. What government can do, what individuals can do. Individuals work on a principle of, any marketing book will tell you ADA, awareness, interest, desire, and interest. So the awareness about this China has to go on. I'll tell you an example. Look, we have a 65 billion trade deficit with China, what I read last. Now, $65 billion is our defense budget, what we declare approximately, though in reality it's more. But if we just stop importing from China, you can double your defense budget. $65 billion.
I know the maths is not exact, obviously, but I'm trying to say from the consumer. I'm trying to say from the consumer perspective. How do I get away from buying the latest a laptop by the Chinese firm that is now gone on an e-commerce platform, and I'm told is already sold out?
Rishabh, you have given a lot of, that's what you are exactly doing. You are doing the awareness part of it so that the people watching this broadcast know exactly. The names you have given, a lot of people don't know. Let me take an example of Paytm. Paytm, the money comes in from Alibaba Holdings, Singapore Private Limited. So conceptually, it might appear to you, the money is coming from Singapore, but it is owned by Alibaba Holdings in China. And let's not, looking at a political
But so these are the ones these are the big ones we know of. These are the big ones we know of, right?
There are a lot of people we don't know of. And Jack Ma,
and somebody needs a list now. I don't know. We found out about the 1% buyout in HDFC because of an HDFC market filing.
Correct.
Because HDFC is a listed firm, so it has to do a market filing. If they're unlisted firms,
Correct.
we don't know, and that's a major problem. So we need a publication pointing this out.
I have one suggestion, Rishabh. There's something called as beneficiary ownership. Government of India in this financial year came up with a, kind of a ruling, not ruling, an order, which is where you have to submit your beneficiary ownership. That means anybody who is owning more than 5% of the beneficiary ownership is that even through subsidiaries, who are the beneficiary ownership. This beneficiary ownership of 5% should be made a rule of the country, and within next 3 months, every company, every entity, every goddamn dukaan has to come up with it.
For the people who don't want to follow the rules, and there will be people who create enough Benami fronts to not follow the rules, at least force them to create the Benami fronts, and then be worried about which Cayman Island company suddenly has a $100 billion investment into India. Then General Dhruv Katoch, we've been talking. The General Dhruv Katoch, here's a reality check, and the reality check always bites us, right? Where we want to act, we can act. There is now a petition online which has more than 3 million people who've written up to boycott these big-time Bollywood actors and families. The people are unfollowing them on the social media handles, where it's become an appreciable amount that their followings have dipped. But when you're seeing electronics, and electronics the most easy example that comes, I'm told the latest Chinese laptops are sold out on e-commerce platforms.
You see, one of the things is that the public really has very limited knowledge on what they are buying.
Absolutely.
It is very simple to say it's a Chinese product, but when that person is buying it, he really doesn't know, and this has really not formed part of his conscious decision making. Now I think it is becoming very, very important, and more people, especially the educated elite, are getting very perturbed at what China is doing. But along with that, I think, when we are looking at Indian manufacturing, I think we have serious problems which we need to overcome. I'll just simply talk of the defense sector. Now, why are we, when we are looking at ammunition, or when we are looking at our weapon systems, a very large percentage of these we are still importing. And there is no reason to import. I think we need to get the private sector in a very big way, and you will find a huge change coming up. Electronics, especially when you spoke of the chips technology, this should have come in 10 years ago or 15 years ago, and we didn't do it. Now, of course, now it's still not too late. I mean, at some point we have to.
It's never too late.
And unless we do these things, I think we are going to be in trouble. In defense technology especially, I think we have to actually go desi. Please do it internal house. Make your defense ordnance factories accountable. or better still, take all defense manufacturing and put them under the industries ministry and outside the defense ministry. What will happen now is that they will have to compete with the rest. And once they compete with the rest, it is up to the into the defense ministry to buy from whomsoever they wish to buy.
Okay, interesting option. And of course, the logic is that let people with innovation come to you rather than you coming up with the tenter. Maybe there's something that exists out there that no one in government has ever heard of until the Chinese are using it against you one day. Professor Nalapat, just on this thought, if we went through a very difficult and arduous exercise of quickly having in the last 3 months to isolate what we could not import from anywhere else because of a global lockdown and start producing those things from ventilators to PPE to this and that, high tech to low tech. How do we do a mammoth exercise, or what are our sensitivities in not being, I've given you the chips as an obvious example, but there's so many things that we need to isolate and then invite Indian companies that here is a minimum order for 20 lakh of these units, you start producing it so we don't have to get it from China.
Rishabh, please look at two successes of India, atomic energy and space. In both, we've been the most sanctioned nation on the planet after North Korea. And yet we were able to develop it. Why? Because the Secretary Atomic Energy is a scientist. And the Secretary ISO, for space, is also a scientist. You have domain specialists there. Now in the Defense Ministry, you'll have somebody who has come in from fisheries the previous day, or maybe even sports or music. And then, of course, in 3 days, he feels he's an expert on defense, and he has to question every general and basically, hold up things for months and years. So this is the problem we are facing. And this is the problem. Now, so far as China is concerned, I want to point out something. It's not just, defense, I fully agree. Unfortunately, when you buy from a foreign company, they can pay you in a way which Indian companies may find it difficult to. And that is one fact of life, which has unfortunately led to this flood of imports in so many sectors in India. But I want to make another point, and that is that whether it is handicrafts, I have seen traditional crafts, people in UP, Moradabad, other places in UP, Saharanpur, they are losing their traditional livelihoods because cheap Chinese imports of these handicrafts and handmade items are flooding the market. You are throwing lakhs of people, including skilled craftsmen, out of work. And this is what is happening in plain sight of multiple governments, and yet nobody does anything. Why? Because all these, I'm not just talking about Chinese, all these foreign companies expert in finding out one official or the other who can put a spanner in the whole thing, and that official is kept happy, and as a result, the imports flood in, and handicrafts people, crafts people, so many people are deprived of their livelihoods.
No, until we say no, and until we say that, okay, we're going to be worrying about even how we consider our votes and our approaches on whether you're giving out contracts to the Chinese or not, maybe things can change. Sumit wants to come in for a quick point. Sumit, go ahead.
Rishabh, I have 1 point, sir. I was reading some data. 32% of the Chinese import plus another 12%, is what? Is mineral fuels and oils and these stones, precious stones. So approximately $30 billion you're paying to Chinese for import of mineral oils and precious stones, which there are numerous other sources where we can directly import from. We might be a little bit expensive to import from them, but it's still $30 billion. So why doesn't government come up with some, like for example, MOD is a strategic industry where we declare we don't buy anything from China. Let's come up with these things, declare a few more list of strategic industries where we don't import anything from China, because the two facts which I'm talking about is $30 billion on the table. It's a very, very important figure what I want to give, so that the people are aware how much money.
No, but this is the point I'm taking. No, the point Professor Nalapat, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just 1 point. Look at rare earths. Look at thorium. These are Indian, very important minerals that we are just allowing to leach into the ocean.
It's sitting in Kerala.
Some NGO, some complaint gets filed, and lo and behold, we are dependent on other countries for uranium, something that is there in abundance in India. Let me tell you, systematically there's been an effort to ensure that we are dependent on imports, especially in critical technologies and in defense.
I've already raised the issue of copper
NGO
several times.
sabotage.
Sanjay Agarwal wants
That's
to come in.
called
Mr.
NGO
Agarwal, go ahead.
sabotage. Yeah.
Mr.
No,
Agarwal.
I just added a term NGO sabotage. NGOs have been used very often in our country to sabotage projects of national importance. And this is a very typical example which Professor Narapat gave.
Correct.
So I think...
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
The
But
thorium
one more
is sitting
thing
in the
would like
science.
to-
I know
one
these
more
are not
thing.
easy arguments for people in a free country to understand, but we have to grow up from the naivety that certain NGOs, foundations are not fronts for the CIA. They have been fronts for the CIA since they were founded. That they are not fronts for other countries. All of them are not. But we can't be naive to say that everybody who runs a campaign of protest against an Indian factory is doing it from the goodness of their hearts to protect the people. These are also strategic wars that happen with not a shot fired. And just think about it, why we are now importers of copper rather than being exporters of copper. Let me quickly get Dhruv Katoch once again. Dhruv Katoch, again, I'm just trying to boil this down into some practicalities before I run out of time. What would be, you mentioned defense in a specific area where you have an area of interest and speciality. But as a normal Indian who has to go maybe to the shop to buy a product, or you get somebody in your family to say, okay, let's see the next washing machine or a microwave that I need to buy, and I'm looking at a brand or a reasonably priced product, and I'm punching in my credit card number, I don't know anything else about the product. What awareness do we need?
I think the basic awareness we need is who is making that product or where that product is being manufactured. And unfortunately, when you are actually looking at it, many Indian manufacturers, what they have done is they actually go and buy, let us say it's a toaster. You know, you have taken the product from China, you have brought it back to India, you assembled it, and you put your brand name there. So now when a consumer like me goes and buys that product, I think it's an Indian washing machine or an Indian toaster or an Indian whatever it is. But unfortunately, it is not. It is really a Western product. Now you ask an Indian manufacturer, why aren't you making it here? And he says, because there are too many hassles. Now I think when we're looking at that ease of doing business, we have to sort out these things. Also, there's one more point, Rishabh, very quickly I'll give it. This is, when we're looking at futuristic research. Now we are looking at the 5th generation aircraft. Why don't we look at the 6th generation aircraft?
Exactly.
And collaborate with, say, Israel, Germany, and Britain, or Israel, Germany, Britain, and France. All 4 of us or 5 of us get together.
But make it here. But make it here, exactly. So 6G, 6th generation aircraft. You need to be thinking about those things right now to bear the dividends 10 years from now, because 10 years from now, Huawei will still be kicking around and be telling you that you must now have our 6G because you don't have your own. You still can't manufacture a chip. If you can't manufacture every single product here, my mobile phone, my laptop, I have an iPad lying here, this TV screen which you guys are watching this from, most of the parts are not manufactured in India because they're all silicon chip based, and India currently does not manufacture silicon chips. That's it. Game's up, right? It ends over there. Professor Narapat, I just want to hammer home that point. Our inability to get a silicon manufactory going in India, despite some experiments I'm told that are being done in Bengaluru, that TIS and others are working on some new generation technologies that could even make the silicon chip obsolete. We just haven't been able to do this. Why? So if you could just unmute yourself, please.
The only reason is that we don't have an environment for doing that. Mr. Agarwal has been polite enough not to mention the extraordinarily high interest cost of an Indian producer. He has to pay 18% or 15%. The Chinese pay 1.5% or even minus to do that. And the second point is, it is so easy to file to get some, some friendly official to file some fake complaint and to block you and then to harass you, so that you get harassed and harassed, so that you finally leave or give up your intellectual property to somebody else with with deep pockets. I mean, and preferably with foreign exchange in those pockets. So this is a systematic thing happening. I am delighted that Prime Minister Modi is finally decriminalizing large sections of our regulatory structure. It is absolute nonsense to criminalize. And I want to say one thing which is not very popular. And there is a gentleman called Vijay Mallya who gave a false complaint against us, the Sunday Guardian. Frankly, I mean, in my opinion, that nothing can be more low than Vijay Mallya. but the man is offering you 8,000 crores. For God's sake, I would rather have Vijay Mallya running around the whole world in his shorts and with 8,000 crores than have him in jail and none of that money. Let's be practical. Let's not worry about sending people to jail. Let's collect from their money as the Americans do and the British.
Okay, Sumit, quick last word.
Three quick points to make. One is that, what you are rightly doing is awareness, because EDA model will only follow if you have ample awareness. Second is, there's a concept called certificate of origin. Every good, what General Saab said, should have a COI, certificate of origin. Now you cannot hide your assembling or putting a label in India. Point number 3, sir, I was doing a study. $110 million. 800 crore ki agarbatti you are importing from China, Rishabh ji. For the sake of God, why do we need to pay Chinese 800 crores for the import of agarbatti, sir? Agarbatti, aap bataiye, we are importing from China. $110 million. 800 crore. This bullshit, this crap has to stop. If the people are not willing to stop, the government must come in and stop this. We can produce the agarbattis for the whole world. We don't need a goddamn China to give us agarbattis for $110 million.
Okay, still public TV.
To ban such products, I would like to add.
Yeah, Mr. Agarwal, last word, sir. 30 seconds.
We should clearly go out and ban such products which are directly hurting our craftsmen. And we should not bother about WTO or any such thing. WTO has showed itself to be such a redundant organization. The China-US trade war, they have simply forgotten about the world WTO and they've been going about whatever they wish to do. And in any case, whatever complaint is filed is going to take...
You're right. Let's worry about WTO later. I agree. Let's solve our problems and worry about WTO later. I'll give you a small example. I was out trying to buy a flask yesterday, vacuum flask yesterday, and like most people, I went onto an e-commerce platform and saw that one was reasonably priced and had enough star ratings, and I was about to buy it until I saw the packaging and I saw Chinese writing on the packaging. And it took me 2 more minutes to find an Indian made flask. Same thing, same product. I think there was a 10 rupee price difference. The thing is just changing a small habit of just looking, because the Chinese have swarmed us with these products. So we are continuing consuming this. So we have to ask ourselves, why is it that the Chinese made TVs or owned or branded TVs, laptop, mobile phones are still the hot potato? Number 1 is, do we have an alternative? And number 2, are we aware of the alternative? And number 3, are we aware, most people aware, that these are not Indian companies, that these are actually Chinese companies? That's not everything, but that's the start. We leave it there. We put this charter up on our Facebook page and our Twitter page. Write to us. We'll keep on hammering this home until we can actually dent the trade deficit. If by December of 2020, our trade deficit with China is still the same, we've all failed. Everything was meaningless. Good night.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.